Welcome to Trauma Demystified. I am Natalie Jovanich, your host on this journey. I am a trauma counselor and coach, and I also bring my own lived experience to healing trauma. Today's episode is Healing Relational Trauma, What No One Tells You. But before we dive into the episode, I want to honor someone who was an essential part of my trauma recovery journey. A dear colleague and friend, someone who died by suicide a few years ago, continues to inspire me every day. I want to honor not just her life, but also her death. To hold space for the fullness of her journey with all of its joys, struggles, and pain. That kind of holding reminds me of how complex healing is and why respect and humility matter so much for ourselves and others. We were both immigrants living in Spain, searching for belonging and healing. I always admired her amazing gift for social connection. She was a true social butterfly, a skill I don't have. Her passing was difficult, and this might resonate with you too, because suicide is often connected to the heavy burden of unresolved trauma, excruciating pain, and stigma. I feel fortunate to be where I am today, but her story reminds me that everyone's healing journey is different. Not all of us have the same resources, outcomes, or luck. Even with all the research and knowledge we have today, some things still remain a mystery. Every year, I'm reminded why we need to talk about the messy, complicated parts of trauma recovery. Why these gentle, honest conversations matter so much. This episode is my way to continuing that conversation. For her and anyone who has ever felt alone with their pain. If you or someone you love is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please reach out for support. I'll include some resources in the episode description. They focus on Canada and may not be accessible outside of Canada, but I encourage you to find what's available wherever you live. You deserve the care and help you need. Trauma recovery isn't about everything in your life magically working out. And this episode isn't about quick fixes or simple answers. It's about the real, complicated, and sometimes messy truth about healing relational trauma. I share from my journey and the stories I've witnessed along the way. This isn't a surface-level chat. It's an invitation to hold space for the complexity of healing, with honesty, gentleness, and respect. As always, take what resonates and leave the rest. So let's get started. The first truth is, healing relational trauma is about what's within your control. If you have experienced relational trauma, you might have parts of yourselves that are always looking outward, taking responsibility for things that were never really yours to carry. One of the hardest truths I've learned during trauma recovery is this. Healing doesn't mean others will always treat you with the respect and fairness you deserve. You cannot control how other people behave or respond to you. Healing from relational trauma or childhood abuse often means letting go of control over others and turning your attention to what is within your control. That might look different depending on where you are in your life. It includes your actions, your emotional responses, and the boundaries you choose to set. But it doesn't mean you'll always get what you want or deserve. For example, you might heal a belief like, I don't matter. And trauma recovery means that the belief no longer has power over your feelings. But healing doesn't mean no one will ever treat you like you don't matter. Unfortunately, that is outside of your control. What changes is how those moments affect you. Do you learn to respond with a grounded strength, whether setting boundaries, speaking up, or walking away? Healing won't stop someone from ghosting you, ignoring your boundaries, or breaking their promises. It won't prevent people from being hurtful or abusive. But trauma recovery does change your relationship to those experiences. It teaches you that you have agency. It invites you to trust yourself especially the parts of you that notice red flags or feel uneasy. It empowers you to protect your well-being, and over time it reshapes how you relate to others' behavior. Healing reminds you that other people's actions say more about them than you. You might still feel hurt or disappointed, but those moments won't pull you down like before. You won't spiral into shame or helplessness the same way. Trauma recovery isn't a shield against pain or a promise for a fairy tale life. It's a way to move through life with more clarity and strength. Well, as some of you may know, I'm non-binary. I live in Canada now, and while I believe it's quite safe here, the rise of the anti-trans movement is becoming more visible here too. It's not just in the States anymore, it's here too. And yeah, part of me is scared. Part of me is hurt that the hatred against my community is so big. And part of me knows I cannot control any of this. That's not just a thought. That's something I sit with almost every day. I've learned that part of healing, especially when you've lived through relational trauma, childhood abuse, or systemic oppression, is learning to focus on what's within your control, even if it's just one small thing. Sometimes it's how I care for my nervous system. Sometimes it's setting a boundary. Sometimes it's speaking up. Sometimes it's just saying to myself, this feels overwhelming. It's not okay for me. And I'm just allowing myself to feel whatever's there. If you're cis, meaning your gender identity aligns with the biological sex you were assigned at birth, this particular fear might not influence your daily life in the same way, and that's okay. But I also want to share this. In working with many cis clients over the years, I've noticed a common theme: navigating toxic social work environment, navigating climate change, and trying to figure out how to respond in ways that feel empowering and respectful of oneself is part of all of our lives. So I'm curious what feels out of your control right now. Even if our experiences are different, we all need to return to what is in our hands. That's something many of us share. So if you're facing a challenging situation right now, I invite you to pause and ask yourself, what is within my control at this moment? What is one small step I can take to feel more empowered? You don't have to have all the answers. You have to start where you are right now. The second truth is why healing relational trauma doesn't always lead to love, but it's still worth it. Well, when I was younger, I went to therapy with this quiet hope that if I just healed enough, I'd finally find a loving relationship. I still remember a moment with one of my therapists. She told me about another client. That night, she left therapy, she met her lifetime partner in a bar, and they are still together. I clung to that story like a promise. If I did enough work, processed enough pain, transformed enough patterns, my reward would be a stable, fulfilling partnership. A year later, I sat heartbroken again. After a partner and former friend ghosted me. I had worked hard on myself, I had grown, but it did not lead to love. And that same story that once gave me hope, it suddenly made me feel like a failure. A part of me wondered silently, what's wrong with me? I don't know if you've ever heard a story like that, one that was meant to be inspiring but somehow backfired. Maybe you've had a counselor or a coach saying something that stuck with you, but not in a helpful way. I wonder if anything's coming up for you right now. Looking back now, I can see it more clearly. Healing only changes what's within our control. It helps us grow emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. It builds self-awareness. We start to notice patterns sooner. We can set better boundaries. We might choose more aligned partners and leave unhealthy dynamics earlier. But it does not control the outcome. Because outcomes often depends on things outside of us. Timing, other people's choices, systemic injustices, or just plain luck. A relationship is a dance of two. You're responsible for your steps, but you cannot lead the whole thing alone. And trauma recovery can't manufacture connection. It can't make someone stay. It can't guarantee meeting someone who wants to dance with you when you want to. Now, when I work with clients, I don't tell stories like the one my therapist told me. Because the truth is, some people do find love quickly. Some take longer. Some fall in love, lose it, and try again. They are all amazing, brave, deeply worthy human beings. They are committed to their trauma recovery journey and become a healthier and better version of themselves. Honestly, I don't know why these differences exist, and I try not to make up stories about them anymore. Because what I do know is this: it's not because someone isn't healed enough. That's just not how life works. Healing doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. It doesn't promise perfect relationships or happy endings. It helps us show up as better versions of ourselves, but it doesn't control the whole story. So if that's your story too, if you've worked hard and still faced heartbreak, please know it's not your fault. You did not fail, and your pain is valid. Take a breath. Remember where you started. Remember who you are now, and honor how far you've come. Because that's the objective measure of healing relational trauma. And if you feel up for it, I'd love to invite you to reflect on something. What have you learned about love on your trauma recovery journey? And how might you use that wisdom now to nurture a deeper relationship with yourself and to create the relationship you want? Now let's look at the third truth. Healing doesn't guarantee protection from new wounds. You know, we often talk about trauma like it's something that happened in the past, something that's over, like here's what happened to you, and now here's how you heal, and everything will be okay. Have you noticed that too? For many people, myself included, life does get better with trauma recovery. There are real beautiful benefits. When our nervous system calms down, we feel safe and connected more often. As we get clearer about our boundaries, we can choose healthier and more supportive relationships. I wonder if you've noticed that in your trauma recovery journey. But then, this overwhelming wave of systemic violence hit me. I wasn't prepared for it. I couldn't have imagined it. Looking back now, I see how much my whole idea about healing was shaped by those 15 years without trauma. And yes, a lot of luck. It was painful, but it taught me humility. It showed me how complex life is. And once again, I had to start a trauma recovery journey from systemic trauma this time. Now I remind my clients, when necessary, that just because you started healing relational trauma doesn't mean challenges, losses, or even new trauma won't show up. Sometimes we are not stuck in our recovery. Sometimes life just throws something new onto us, and we need to work through it. From my own experience, I've learned that healing past trauma doesn't mean you're safe from trauma in the future. Trauma recovery does build resilience. It makes us stronger, more self-aware, and better able to meet life's challenges. But the risk of trauma? It's never zero. Life is unpredictable, uncertain. Sometimes we get blindsided by things we've never expected. And it's not because we did anything wrong. It's just life. Healing gives us resilience. However, it doesn't promise lasting peace or that we won't suffer. Some people's lives continue to unfold beautifully, easily. For others, there are unexpected losses, betrayals, or shocks that no amount of healing could have stopped. Systemic oppression adds another layer of complexity to this. Healing cannot prevent future trauma. I just want you to understand that, and while I really hope that this never happens, just be aware of that fact. Trauma recovery also won't stop oppression if you belong to a marginalized group, but it helps us face life as it is. Not just the version we wished it were. It helps us to be empowered in our lives. So if any of this resonates with you, I invite you to pause for a moment and think, What challenges have you faced on your trauma recovery journey? What have they taught you about life? The fourth truth is when healing relational trauma means letting go of others. Growing up with childhood abuse, I believed that if I just loved someone enough, I could help them change. That belief kept me tied to relationships that were hurting me, especially with my family of origin. Many years ago, I worked hard to keep the connection with my sibling, even though their behavior towards me was toxic. I clung to the hope that therapy might help us both heal, that our shared childhood trauma might be enough to reconnect us. My therapist at the time never asked me about context. She supported my wish for a healthy relationship with my sibling, but didn't explore the dynamics between us or ask about our past. She didn't ask the crucial questions: how safe do you feel? What are the dynamics in your relationship? Are they taking responsibility? Are you sacrificing your well-being for the sake of loyalty? Because those questions never came up, I held on to my desired outcome, a healthy relationship with my sibling. Looking back, I see I ignored the toxic behavior, need for control, angry outbursts, and lack of accountability. I only saw their pain and kept finding excuses for the constant blame they placed on me. I didn't dare to say, "Stop treating me this way," because I feared it would end the relationship. Maybe you've noticed similar patterns within yourself too. Eventually, when my sibling wanted to become a parent, I couldn't ignore the reality anymore. I witnessed harmful behaviors between them and their partner. For a year, they weren't willing to take responsibility. As an observer, it looked like they were repeating a similar cycle of violence we both experienced growing up. And while I could understand why, I also had to accept that I couldn't change it for them. At this stage of their life, they weren't willing to take responsibility for what was theirs. I said, if you seek help, I'll stay. If not, I need to step away. We haven't had contact since. I don't know if they have changed. And I've come to accept that it's not mine to manage. It wasn't easy. It broke my heart to end that relationship. And it slowly healed through gentleness. But it was the most healing choice I could make. It taught me that sometimes self-respect must come before love. Staying in that relationship would have meant abandoning myself. And I chose myself. Today I can see that I never fully understood my sibling. And I don't need to. I can still respect that we chose different paths. Please don't get me wrong. I'm aware that childhood abuse can lead to harmful behaviors. Relationship trauma often shows up in how we relate. That's not a flaw, it's a survival pattern. But survival patterns aren't an excuse to avoid responsibility. We begin to make a difference when we take ownership of our harmful behaviors and commit to change. If we grew up in dysfunctional family dynamics, it's common that some people take responsibilities and for others not to, or only later on. In the end, you can only control what's yours. Maybe you've had to make a decision like that too, one that cost you something but gave you back yourself. Even in my professional role, I cannot force people to change or heal them. It's more complex than that. What I can do is create an environment that supports trauma recovery. I can offer tools, foster safety and trust, and hold space for people's emotions. But in the end, they have to choose to heal themselves. I know that self-respect is something many people with relational trauma are still learning. Some carry parts that have learned to abandon themselves to keep the peace. Others take on too much because it feels safer than being left behind. These aren't character flaws. They are responses to trauma, adaptive coping strategies to survive violent or neglectful environments. Back in Spain, my friend and I often ask, what is healthy love? How do we know when to let go of a relationship because we have outgrown it? She helped me tremendously to find my answers. So here are some questions I reflect on and offer to others when navigating painful relationships. What kind of relationship do you truly want in your life? Where do you feel out of alignment with those desires in your current relationships? How much can you give or lower your standards? without losing sight of who you are. If you met this person today for the first time, would you choose to have a relationship with them? So I hope these questions help you to find your answers within yourself. Now let's look at the next point. A therapist may share their opinion, and you are allowed to agree to disagree. I once saw a therapist during a complicated dating situation. The man I was dating had broken up with me 3 times and kept coming back. I was confused, hurt, and overwhelmed. Finally, I decided to end things. When I brought it up in therapy, I was hoping for clarity, maybe even validation. Instead, my therapist told me I was too complicated and that I had to stay. She didn't know the context and she didn't ask. Not about the relationship, not about the patterns, nothing. I stayed longer than I should have, not because of him, but because I began to doubt myself. I thought the problem really was me. Perhaps if I was easier, less complex, more accommodating, maybe then he would stay. Her comment echoed louder than my inner knowing. Looking back, I wish I had spoken up in the session. I wish I had said, I don't agree with you. But I did not have that voice yet. Now I do. Healing taught me to trust my intuition. Looking back, I know therapy isn't about being told what to do. It's a space to explore your truth and find your answers. A counselor might offer reflections or express concerns. Sometimes they can see things you may not see in the moment. But the choice of what to do in a relationship, that's always yours. Trauma counseling should be a space where your boundaries are respected. As a trauma counselor and coach, I never assume I know someone's life better than they do. They live in their bodies 24/7. I see them for 1 hour a week. I don't have the answers, but I can help them to find their own. You are allowed to disagree with your trauma counselor. You're also allowed to leave a counselor who doesn't honor your complexity. So as you listen, I invite you to follow that same principle. What's something I shared in this episode today that you disagree with? And what might this disagreement reveal about your story or your truth? Please know I'm sharing from my best knowledge, shaped by both professional expertise and lived experience. That doesn't mean I know better than you. You are the authority in your own life. The next truth is self-trust comes before trusting others. Years ago, I dated someone I used to be friends with. I respected him, I trusted him. He'd been a solid friend and colleague. We'd known each other for years. He was German and I'm German-Croatian. Here's something I hadn't shared back then. I had made a quiet promise to myself. Never date a German man again. Not a logical promise. It wasn't about hatred or anger. It was just an inner sense. You see, I'd experienced small but cutting moments that reminded me I didn't quite belong. Microaggression, subtle signs of otherness. And while they weren't frequent, they were enough to plant a seed. That promise wasn't about all Germans. It was about safety in intimate relationships. It was my nervous system trying to protect me. Early in that relationship, a protective part of me spoke up. Remember what you promised? And I heard it. I noticed a tension in my body, but I brushed it aside. After all, my friends told me how great he was. They were German too, so they didn't carry the same inner signals I did. Looking back, I'm not saying I shouldn't have dated him, but I wish I had trusted myself more and voiced my concerns. Not to accuse him, but to honor myself. Because the truth is, a part of me felt uneasy about his privilege, his status, and our cultural difference. And that part was right. If I'd given that voice more space, just enough to name what I felt, maybe I would have seen things more clearly. Perhaps I would have chosen differently or more deliberately. Healing doesn't mean avoiding discomfort at all costs, but it does mean listening to yourself. It also means leaning into uncomfortable conversations. Actually, that's a great way to assess the health of a connection, if it feels safe enough. It means noticing when something feels off and being brave enough to stay with it. You know that feeling, right? When your body says, before your brain catches up. It's not about running away at the first red flag. It's about trusting yourself enough to ask questions, to say, something feels off here, and I want to understand why. It also means noticing how the other person responds when you do speak up. Do they get defensive, dismiss you, or do they listen? That relationship taught me something that stayed with me. Self-trust comes first. Friends mean well, but they speak from their experience, not yours. And sometimes your inner wisdom whispers truth that others can't see, especially if you and your friends belong to different communities. Healing relational trauma doesn't make us more compliant with social norms. Frankly, some of those norms are pretty unhealthy. It makes us more attuned to who we are. It invites us to move at our own pace. So yeah, maybe you need more time to get to know someone. Maybe sex after 3 dates doesn't feel right in your body. And for many people who have experienced rape, it doesn't. And that is okay. There is no rule book, there is no timeline, just your truth and your body's wisdom. The more I healed, the more I realized not everyone is trustworthy. And that's not cynical, it's just real. And yes, this wisdom came years after I spent a coaching training yelling the phrase, I trust man, at the beginning of my trauma recovery, because I was so indoctrinated by the simplified idea that if I just trusted man, suddenly they would all become trustworthy. Truthfully, I don't think it's about gender and can be applicable for any genders. But just be aware, just because you change your belief, it doesn't mean that every person will be trustworthy. What changed wasn't other people. What changed was me. Self-trust meant learning to listen to my body, to say no without over-explaining, to notice when something felt off and believe myself, even if no one else did. It also meant trusting my judgment about toxic dynamics, even if others said, oh, I think you're overreacting. We all have different blindfolds, and learning to really recognize toxic dynamics, it takes time and it takes healing. It's not a quick journey, but it's a powerful one. Yes, relational trauma has a cost, but it also brings wisdom. Learning to trust your inner wisdom, that's part of living an empowered life. It's not selfish and it's not survival. It is honestly sacred. So take a moment if it resonates with you. Can you think of a time you trusted someone else's opinion more than yours? What made their voice feel more valid than yours? And what made shift if you started trusting your inner knowing just a tiny bit more? You know, healing relational trauma isn't linear. It's not something you can predict or schedule. And honestly, it doesn't come with any guarantees. I didn't know that back then, but now I see how true it is. Healing won't promise you the perfect relationship, a pain-free life, or endless peace. Most of these things are out of your control. I've learned that life is way messier than that. What healing does offer, at least in my experience, is something quieter but deeper. A connection with yourself that feels more real and empowered. A bit more compassion for your past, even those parts you wish you could forget. Clarity in the middle of what's ever happening right now. Holding space for complexity, and a kind of strength that help you face the future, even the scary parts. Maybe you've noticed that too, or perhaps you're just starting to see it. Healing helps you return to your whole messy, beautiful self, and that, to me, is always worth it. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing this. Also, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, reflections, or stories to share, send them my way. Your voice matters here. I leave my email in the description below. Thank you for being with me today. Until the next time, take care of yourself.